The pigs never stopped coming, and neither did the hunger. No one believed the rumors about Porkton Sausage Company until the hunger found its way to their doorsteps. The factory didn't just produce sausages. It harvested something far worse. It would make you think twice before ever tasting another sausage. On the outskirts of a sleepy Midwestern town in Iowa stood an old, looming factory. Known officially as Porkton Sausage Company, locals simply referred to it as the factory. It had been the lifeblood of the town for generations, providing steady jobs and fueling the town's economy. But as years went by, rumors began to swirl. The once thriving community started to whisper about strange occurrences within its walls. Cassie Rivers, a young investigative journalist from Des Moines, drove into town on a crisp October morning, drawn by rumors of the factory's dark past. Cursed pigs? Missing workers? A cursed hunger? Sounds like a bad horror flick, she muttered to herself. But the moment she stepped out of her car, something felt off. The air seemed thicker, the quiet too absolute. Her contact, an ex-employee named Bill Hargrove, was waiting for her at a diner across the street from the factory. Bill, a wiry man in his 60s, looked over his shoulder nervously as Cassie slid into the booth. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "That's what they all say before they spill the beans," Cassie replied with a smirk. Bill's hands trembled as he stirred his coffee. "It's not just a story. That place, it's alive. And it's hungry." Cassie leaned in closer, her curiosity piqued. Bill explained how, years ago, the factory was modernized under the leadership of a mysterious CEO, Graham Fulton. Machines replaced most of the workers, but the pigs processed through the factory never seemed to run out. For every pig slaughtered, another seemed to appear on the conveyor belt, identical to the last. "Clonings?" Cassie asked, raising an eyebrow. Bill shook his head. "Not science. Something darker." The workers who stayed said they'd see pigs looking at them with human-like eyes, as if they knew. And then, the hunger started. Hunger. Those who worked too close to the machines would start eating anything they could get their hands on. First it was snacks, then whole meals, then raw meat. They couldn't stop, no matter how much they ate. Some even. He trailed off, staring at his trembling hands. "What happened to them?" Cassie pressed. "They disappeared. Either fired or swallowed up by the factory. That's when I quit." Determined to uncover the truth, Cassie snuck into the factory that night. The place was eerily silent, save for the hum of machines. She expected to see the usual assembly lines and processing equipment, but what she found sent chills down her spine. Rows upon rows of pigs were hooked to conveyor belts, moving in an endless loop. They weren't squealing or resisting. They were silent, their glassy eyes following her every move. As she ventured deeper, she found an enormous machine at the heart of the factory. It was pulsating, almost like it was breathing. The walls around it were covered in strange, glowing runes. A sense of dread washed over her as she noticed something horrifying. Half-eaten sandwiches, gnawed bones, and discarded plates littered the area. The machine wasn't just processing meat, it was feeding itself. A sudden noise made her whirl around. Standing in the shadows was Graham Fulton, his face pale and gaunt. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice hollow. "What is this place?" Cassie demanded, pointing at the monstrous machine. Fulton sighed, his shoulders slumping. "It's not a factory. It's a curse. Decades ago, desperate to save the company, I made a deal with something ancient. Infinite pigs, infinite sausage. But it came at a price. The hunger," Cassie whispered. Fulton nodded. "The factory needs to feed. And anyone who stays too long becomes part of it." Cassie felt the room grow colder. She backed away, but the conveyor belts began to move faster, the pigs staring at her with almost pleading eyes. "Run!" Fulton yelled, but it was too late. The machine roared to life, and Cassie felt an invisible force pulling her toward it. With every ounce of strength, she broke free and sprinted out of the factory, never looking back. She didn't stop until she reached her car and sped out of town. Back in Des Moines, Cassie wrote her article, but no one believed her story. Porkton Sausage Company continued its operations, and the town kept eating its sausages, oblivious to the dark secret behind every bite. But Cassie knew the truth. And every now and then, late at night, she felt a gnawing hunger she couldn't explain. The curse, it seemed, had followed her home. The hunger grew worse by the day. Cassie's fridge was never full enough, and she found herself raiding grocery stores in the middle of the night for raw meat. Her once pristine apartment became cluttered with empty wrappers, discarded takeout containers, and butcher's paper stained with blood. She knew she had to do something before she lost herself entirely. Late one night, as she lay in bed, the hunger gnawing at her insides, she received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "You're not alone." The message contained only an address and a single sentence, "There's still a way to break the curse." Cassie's journalistic instincts overrode her fear. The next night, she followed the address to an abandoned church on the edge of town. Inside, she found a group of people gathered in a circle, their faces gaunt but determined. At the center stood Bill Hargrove. "I knew you'd come," he said. "You've felt it, haven't you? The hunger." Cassie nodded, too weak to speak. Bill explained that the factory's curse was ancient, tied to a long-forgotten ritual meant to summon prosperity. The runes on the walls of the factory weren't just decorations, they were the key to breaking the cycle. But doing so would require destroying the heart of the machine, the core that kept it alive. "It'll fight back," Bill warned. "The factory doesn't just want food. It wants us." Together, the group devised a plan. They would infiltrate the factory during its downtime and destroy the machine's core. Armed with sledgehammers, crowbars, and gasoline, they set out on what felt like a suicide mission. The factory was darker and more foreboding than Cassie remembered. As they made their way to the heart of the building, the conveyor belts roared to life, and the air filled with the sound of squealing pigs. Shadows moved along the walls, and the floor seemed to pulse beneath their feet. When they reached the machine, it was glowing with an otherworldly light, its runes pulsating like a heartbeat. The group attacked it with everything they had, but the factory fought back. Conveyor belts wrapped around their legs, and spectral figures emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in agony. Cassie, fueled by desperation, spotted a control panel near the base of the machine. Ignoring the chaos around her, she ran to it and began smashing buttons and pulling levers. The machine let out a deafening roar, and the runes on the walls began to flicker and fade. With one final effort, Cassie poured gasoline over the core and lit a match. The explosion rocked the factory, sending her flying across the room. When she opened her eyes, the machine was silent, its once pulsating core now a smoldering heap of metal. The group stumbled out of the factory, battered but alive. For the first time in weeks, the hunger in Cassie's stomach was gone. The factory was finally dead. In the weeks that followed, the town of Porkton began to recover. The factory was condemned and torn down, and the cursed sausages disappeared from store shelves. Cassie wrote a follow-up article, this time revealing the full truth of what had happened. To her surprise, people believed her. But late at night, when the world was quiet, she could still hear the faint hum of machinery in the back of her mind. The curse was gone, but its memory lingered, a reminder of the price paid for unending hunger.